done trying to make y'all comfortable. For the record, you ain't trying to grow, then it's done for you. For the record, lab on me going all the way. For the record, ain't trying to link, no time to waste. For the record, for the record, for the record.
What's up guys, I'm Tony Woodark. I'm a photographer out of Southern California, and you're in the middle of a multi-episode series on how to shoot film. Today we're going to be talking about how to meter. These are what I recommend, Sekonic light meters. I know a lot of cameras have a built-in light meter, which is great, especially if you're just walking around. I really like my in-camera meter on my Leica. It's a really simple system that just kind of has an arrow if you need to go less exposure, an arrow if you need to go more exposure, and then I have the TTL version, and there's a dot if you're on correct exposure. So this built-in light meter I really like, and the quality of it, how it reads light, is really accurate, and I've gotten amazing results from it. So with a Leica, I would totally recommend it. With other cameras, the light meter can be good or bad, so I would recommend something like this. And I'm not saying all built-in camera light meters are good or bad. I just think you're gonna learn a lot more by having an external light meter and starting to read light, and you're gonna get more consistent results because you're gonna be metering the same way every single time. And then when you get your results, you can start to make changes, and you'll learn a lot more, I think, than just using an in-camera meter and kind of not really thinking that much. Okay. So I'm assuming that you're gonna use an external meter. There's kind of two options. You have this incident meter where this little sphere that comes out is just taking the light that's touching this and getting you a reading. This is a great meter for portraits or for just kind of reading the light in any scenario. This is a great meter for that. If you shoot a lot of landscapes, you might wanna get a combination incident and spot meter. Spot meter means that right here you look through this and there's a viewfinder and there's a spot in the middle of this meter. You could point to somewhere in a landscape and get a reading of that light from that point that you're shooting. There's a lot of nuance that goes into that. There's great videos that Mcdougall did and Matt Day have done on how to use these. I'm not gonna try to teach you how to use these light meters. They're much smarter than I am. But those are kind of your two main options in my opinion if you want to get an external meter. This is about 200 bucks. These you can get about 300, 400 bucks used. And I'd recommend getting one used because they probably still work. They work forever and they're great. I'll link this below too. Another option is a light meter on your phone. I have one that's just called Light Meter. I don't know if you can see that. Pocket light meter, I guess it's called. And you basically look at a scene and you change your ISO. So let's say we have 400 ISO, 2.5, and you can kind of choose your aperture. And then it'll give you, okay, that should be 1/40th of a second. And these are pretty accurate too. So let's actually test it. 400. So this is telling me 1/15th of a second at 2.8. Let's do this at 2.8. 1/30th of a second. So it's only a half a stop off. So it's pretty close. So if you just want to use your phone for a while, that's great. What I'd also recommend is taking notes. Sometimes it's really easy to tell the light, like if it's bright sun and you're just getting a reading and you go, okay, yeah, that's it. But sometimes if you're in variable light and you're like, oh, I want to see what the shadow is or what the highlights are, it might be a little bit more difficult to figure out what light you want to do a reading off of. Write those notes down. Say, I metered for the shadows or I metered for the highlights, and these are the settings that I put in. And so when you get your negatives back, you can look at it and go, oh, did it look a little underexposed or did it look a little overexposed? And you can make those adjustments for the future. That's really how I meter light. The next big thing is really choosing what you want to rate your film at. So that's something that you'll hear people say, like, oh, what'd you rate the film at? And box speed is another thing that you'll hear people say. So box speed at 400 tri-X box speed is 400. So that means 400 ISO. So people go like, oh, did you rate that at 400 ISO? Maybe, like, so that would be putting the ISO at 400 on your light meter, or if you're using your camera's light meter, changing the ISO to 400. or if you're using an iPhone, changing the ISO to 400, that would be box speed. I use this nominal ISO speed guide that Mastin Labs put out, Kirk Mastin's recommendations on what is the nominal ISO for every film. For Portra 400, for example, he recommends rating it at 320 instead of 400. So what that does is you change your meter to 320 and you change your camera, whatever you're reading the light with, to 320. And that means that as you shoot the entire roll at 320 and you give it to the lab, you don't tell them anything, you just say develop it, process it normally. It is overexposing all of your photos by half a stop. And the beautiful thing about film is it has this really good latitude. Not as great in underexposure, but really good in overexposure. So you can overexpose film up to like 6 stops without it being really that big of a deal. You know, if you overexpose film 1, 2, or 3 stops, you probably won't even really notice that much in your scans that you get back. So that's why 320 versus 400, you're just doing like a half stop overexpose, and you're kind of just erring on that side of making sure that you're giving the film enough light to really do its deal. So that's kind of how I shoot Portra 400. Same goes with Tri-X. I really like Tri-X at 320 as well. Just a little bit overexposed. That's box speed, that's rating your film, metering, that's kind of the basics of it. Again, with using a light meter, I'm not gonna go do a 20-minute video on how to use a light meter. I would check out the Kyle Mcdougall and the Matt Dave video. I've got more videos coming, so make sure you subscribe, comment, like, do all that good stuff. And yeah, look forward to sharing more with you.